Hey, it's Mazzy, and how about a battle of the bands? Battle of the San Francisco bands, the Jefferson Airplane versus the Grateful Dead. Smackdown. Now, few rules here. First of all, I despise com- competition when it comes to music. Music is not a competition. But this is for entertainment purposes only. I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. We're going to see how it works out. I mean, you decide, you let me know what you think. I love both these groups. I grew up with the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead. Well, not literally with them, but in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, from Menlo Park down to Palo Alto around Stanford, with Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir, the whole thing. In fact, we lived for a couple years in Menlo Park at that time when Kepler's Books was a thing. And I was too young to see any of these bands there. And Jerry Garcia teaching guitar and banjo and the whole folk scene at the coffee houses down there, the Stanford students and things. And of course, in San Francisco, you have the Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead. They finally come up there, and Grace Licks from Atherton down on the peninsula. She was a little older, went to kind of a preppy school. You got Paul Kantner, you got Yorma and Jack Cassidy from DC coming out here. Again, the Dead are more locally based. For the most part, there are exceptions, and we're not getting into that whole thing. And it doesn't really matter where you're from. People came to San Francisco. You've heard the stories. I was born there. I don't know if I'm going to die there, but maybe I'll be scattered there eventually. So I thought I'd go through the years 1966 through 72. Obviously, the Dead went beyond that, but the Jefferson Airplane stopped at 1972. Aside from ill-conceived later, I think it was in the 80s. Was it ladies? 80s? Reunion album. Horrible album on Columbia Records. Horrible. So I'm leaving that off. But let's go year by year, and let's just talk about what the two bands were putting up with with each other and with themselves. And I saw both these bands in the 60s several times and into the 70s and beyond for the Dead, obviously. And Jefferson Airplane, they kind of petered out in the last few years. But let's start with 1966. They were the first of the San Francisco ballroom psychedelic folk rock bands to be signed to a major label, to RCA Records. Jefferson Airplane, this is their debut. This is when Signe Anderson was their lead vocalist, their main vocalist. Well, one of their main vocalists. They had two killer vocalists with Marty Balin, who really kind of started the group. It was his band, and Signe Anderson here, and then they had Paul Kantner, who was no slouch, but maybe like George Harrison to Lennon and McCartney, if that makes any sense. And of course, even Yorma was doing some great vocals, some folky, bluesy things. But this is a folk rock. This is probably the closest to a folk rock record. This is literally a folk rock record. They cover even Chet Powers' Get Together that the Youngbloods had a big hit, or somewhat of a big hit with. Blues from the Airplane. Again, blues folk. It's No Secret. What a great song by Marty Balin. They covered Tobacco Road, all the folk groups, all the garage bands around this time were doing Tobacco Road. That my garage junior high school and high school band did Tobacco Road. Come Up the Years was the closest. We had a lot of Bay Area radio play, and this is what started it all in terms of all the labels flocking to San Francisco to sign bands, and they did just that. So RCA signs the Jefferson Airplane, and this is the Jefferson Airplane takes off. Again, folk rock, wonderful, wonderful record. Grateful Dead, 1966. Nothing. They're the Warlocks. They're hanging around in Palo Alto. They finally come to San Francisco. They all play, they play Longshoreman Hall, the Ken Kesey, the Acid Test. There's the Fillmore, the Avalon, there's the Matrix Club that Marty Balin opened on Fillmore Street. And a lot of great bands played there. It was kind of more of a smaller club, but the ballroom scene happening with Chet Helms, at the Avalon. Actually, Chet Helms first with the Fillmore, and he alternated with Bill Graham at the Fillmore, and then Bill Graham snuck in, signed the lease, the whole lease, and got it completely, and Chet Helms goes and opens the Avalon Ballroom. And there was a Carousel Ballroom, which later became the Fillmore West when the Fillmore had to move west to Market Street. And but that's another story. Let's go to 1967, the Summer of Love. Well, any hippie around that time will tell you the really cool time was 66, late 66. By the time it happened in the summer of 67, the press got a hold of it. All the kind of filthy, ugly, spotty young kids were coming, taking drugs, and it wasn't the same. But I remember as a 12, 13-year-old kid hanging around and going around there on my bicycle and seeing these bands in Golden Gate Park, seeing the Dead finally in 68. But, we haven't got to 68 yet. So 67. Now, probably of all the albums, this is the thing. This album hit huge. And again, all the labels came. Columbia, they signed Santana. Capitol Records signed Steve Miller Band, Quicksilver Messenger Service. Mainstream Records signs Big Brother and the Holding Company, and later, obviously after Monterey, Clive Davis swoops in and signs away them from Mainstream and gets Big Brother and the Holding Company. Vanguard Records from the East Bay gets Country Joe and the Fish. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Fantasy, local label, gets Creedence Clearwater. I'm missing so many. Columbia gets Moby Grape also. And there's plenty of others. So this is a huge, obviously Grace Slick, the Atherton girl who was in the Great Society with her husband and brother-in-law, leaves that band, brings these great two songs with White Rabbit and Somebody to Love that they did, and it becomes sort of the center point hit factory of this album. This is an amazing album. Every track on this, it's folk rock with more psychedelic thrown in. You get this great instrumental solo piece, which is just cosmic and gorgeous with Embryonic Journey, that great solo guitar, acoustic guitar piece that Jorma Kakkonen writes. But you get, again, the two great singers. You get Grace Slick with her powerful vocal and sort of that Eastern notation she does in sort of the notation side. That's nothing like Grace Slick. But you get this great vocals with Marty Ballin. The two of them, if you've ever seen them live and you see the concerts of them, just going together and playing together and everything, you get this amazing Jack Cassidy's bass playing. I'm giving it to Jack Cassidy on the bass on for both these bands. Now, of course, Phil Lesh is no slouch, but there's something about Jack Cassidy. He wins this round. If it is a round, I think he is the San Francisco psychedelic bass player of all time. He just had this deep sound that kept going. It was amazing how deep he got. 3/5 of a Mile in 10 Seconds, that great song. My Best Friend, a beautiful, with Marty Ballin and Grace Slick on that. That was a hit in the Bay Area. I don't think that was one of the big hits nationally, but you got this beautiful folk rock song, an amazing ballad, just a gorgeous piece of music with Today by Marty Ballin. Of course, you got White Rabbit. You got 3/5 of a Mile in 10 Seconds. Spencer Dryden's drumming is tight, solid. I think it was really a mistake when they pushed him out of the band later. And of course, Plastic Fantastic Lover with that bass riff. And what a friggin' great, amazing song. Jerry Garcia, spiritual advisor on this when they went down to Hollywood RCA Studios to record this. But 1967. Okay, then the Grateful Dead. Finally, they get signed by Warner Brothers Records, and they put out this. This is a unique record for them because it's mostly short songs. Excuse me, except for Viola Blues, which goes on for 10 minutes. It really kind of showcases the Dead. And of course, Pigpen all over this thing. I love the cover of this album, right in that psychedelic sensibility. That photograph at 710 Ashbury, the house that they rented just above Haight Street, 2 blocks up from Haight Street. Captain Trips, Jerry Garcia. This opens up with a song that should have been huge, a great garage rock song. in the golden road to unlimited devotion. Fantastic, fantastic pop, garage pop, psychedelic song. Beat It Down the Line, a great cover, of course, of Good Morning Little Schoolgirl. Cold Rain and Snow is wonderful. Sitting on Top of the World, another cover. But I just love Cream Puff War on this. I mean, that's like bluesy, folky, psychedelic, wonderful record. Morning Dew and new Minglewood Blues. Of course, Morning Dew, another cover. They did a lot of the great blues covers and folk covers that Pigpen really brought in. But this is a fantastic album. It didn't do anything near what Sadistic Pillow did, but still a great album. But of course, not like just letting, Sadistic Pillow ride it out for a couple of years and be the thing. The end of that same year, Jefferson Airplane put out After Bathing at Baxter's. Now, this is something in reverse, and talk about King Midas in reverse. This was a total different direction. This is probably the more avant-garde of the psychedelic masterpieces that people bought this record, and this record came out and they thought, what the fuck? This wasn't as commercial. Of course, it has two heads. It's got Martha, which are very, Paul Kantner's song Martha on this is amazing. It's got a lot of weird shit mixed into it, but it's so cool. This is one of those albums that was a grower for a lot of people. It wasn't, I don't think, what RCA expected, but RCA, to their credit, had a lot of patience with Jefferson Airplane and their subsequent projects and custom labels, which will happen a little later. So 1967 kind of ends with Jefferson Airplane's After Bathing at Baxter's. I'm giving 1967 to the Jefferson Airplane by far for those two albums, for artsy and then the greatest psychedelic pop record ever, maybe, with Sadistic Pillow. And of course, but this is a great did. How can you really judge? This is for fun. Let's talk about 1968 now. They each put out one album. The Grateful Dead, tries to get, they're the live band. They're great live. They're jammy. They're kind of, if you've ever been to a Grateful Dead concert in the 60s or 70s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Later, yes, they kind of did the same thing, but they were more spacey early on as well. There a spacey side to them, but Jerry Garcia playing is so wonderful. Now, Jerry Garcia versus Jorma Kaukonen. This mixes studio with live, and it's an amazing record. I love this record, but it's really, when you really come down to it, it's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of let's get some studio stuff, let's mix it in with some live stuff, let's go back and forth, fisheye lens, the whole kit and caboodle. What a great, again, another wonderful psychedelic masterpiece cover. So it's Anthem of the Sun, and there was a remix version later into the 70s. But then you got this. Now, of course, Jefferson Airplane kind of gets a little more commercial again. They got this great John Hammerfeld cover design that takes the NASA photograph of the nuclear blast and puts the Grateful Dead, mea culpa, the great Jefferson Airplane on the cover, Crown of Creation. But it's got some really accessible songs. It's got two amazing vocals, more than two, but two great, beautiful ballad-like vocals from Grace Slick. Triad, the song that David Crosby wrote that the Byrds would not let him record. They recorded it, but not let him put out on the album. That kind of made Crosby get pushed out of the Byrds. Another story, another day. But also it has Lather, which opens up that song, that beautiful, instead of this bombastic opening, this is beautiful, just sultry voice of Grace Slick on here. It does go into in time, Star Trek. There's a lot of little sound effects and little things on this record. Share a Little Joke, a great Marty Balin song. Cushion Guru. It's that little sound thing going on. If You Feel, Crown of Creation. This is where Paul Kantner was really getting into his sci-fi thing. He was happening. Ice Cream Phoenix, Greasy Heart, and The House at Punio Corners, which is a great sort of it's like a psychedelic epic. And they did that live so many times, so beautifully, so amazing. So these two records again in 1968, I'm giving it to the Airplane again. The Airplane wins 1968 out of the strength of this album. Good album. You know, there's some issues with it all around. Crown of Creation wins for the Jefferson Airplane. 1969. I saw the Dead first in 68. I saw the Airplane first in 69. I saw them several times. Big show at the Polo Fields in Golden Gate Park with the Dead and the Airplane. I saw both of them several times, maybe 2 to 3 times at the Family Dog out on the Great Highway. And of course, you know, the Golden Gate Park shows. The free 68 show, I did see the Dead on Haight Street. But the Dead put out this album. This is Exomoxoa. Exomoxoa. I always get it wrong. It's a palindrome. It's the same from front to back to front. You know, another. Let's get the fisheye shot again on this record. Again, this great Rick Griffin. You know, Rick Griffin did a lot of the psychedelic posters for the Fillmore and the Avalon. It's just a fantastic thing. Now, this is where their songwriting really, really comes into play. Songs that they would be playing, you know, to this day, even beyond Jerry. Obviously, with Saint Stephen, what a great song that is. With Mountains of the Moon, which is kind of a surreal song. China Cat Sunflower, which, you know, with the Dead forever. Cosmic Charlie, I don't think they did that enough, but that's a great, great song. But then they have some weird montage shit like What's Become of the Baby. I actually like that. This is a really good record. But, you know, there's a few inconsistencies, but it's really, really psychedelic and spacey. And Jerry Garcia's voice is so good. I've always loved Jerry Garcia's voice. My criticism with the Dead has always been, I wish when they brought keyboard players in from the 70s on after Pigpen died, they were all really good singers. And, you know, for the most part, they weren't as far as I'm concerned. Brent, no thank you. Okay. Donna, yeah, okay. But that's not a keyboard player, but she came along with the keyboard player. But that's a couple years after this. This is I mean, of course, how can you can't knock this as an album. It is a good album, but it's a good album. It's not a great album, but it's a classic album and it's an important album. Then you have this. This is probably the first important album, the first masterpiece. But this really amplified, displayed what the Grateful Dead were about. This is Live Dead, 1969, Live Dead. This is masterpiece. This was nothing like anything else. Something, anything, nothing, anything in 1969. This, I'm in that picture somewhere, I think. If you only had one Dead record, this would be a great starting point. You know, before they got in some of their, you know, other songs, before they started doing some country covers, which I like actually. But this is, you know, Love Lights, excuse me, turn your Love Lights on here. But this is where Dark Star and the 11 and Saint Stephen really started opening up and jamming. And how many versions of Dark Star do you know? You probably know a lot more than I do. You know every version of Dark Star or the other, or Drums, or the 11. But this is a masterpiece from a Dead's point of view, from a Grateful Dead's point of view, 1969. So, you got good album, fantastic album, Grateful Dead. But the Jefferson Airplane live were no slouch. In fact, when I first saw these bands at the time, the Jefferson Airplane was the better live band. Dead were great, don't get me wrong. But the Jefferson Airplane were tight, were ballsy, were just anthemic in their own psychedelic way. Their songwriting was better. This live record, Bless Is Pointing a Little Ahead, is one of the best live albums of the psychedelic era after. Sure, you could take Quicksilver Messenger Service, Happy Trails, you know, to a point. Ain't like this. Again, the bass playing of Jack Cassidy, the songwriting, how they stretch out with Somebody to Love on here, how they cover Fat Angel, that amazing Donovan song, Fly, Jefferson Airplane, Get You There on Time. This is an amazing sounding record. Is it better than Live Dead? Yes! But Live Dead is important for so many more reasons subsequently, if that makes any sense. This is the better record, Jefferson Airplane, you know. And then, of course, at the end, I would say of all the San Francisco bands, maybe Country Joe and the Fish obviously was the most, Country Joe especially, the most overtly political of all the Bay Area bands. But this album is their most political, their most in-your-face record. But again, it has great songwriting. It opens up with We Can Be Together. The harmonies of Grace and Marty Balin and Paul Kantner. I mean, come on, the Grateful Dead needed studio overdubs in Europe 72 to get it like this, to get it even close. But that they soared. When those three sang, man, especially Marty and Grace, they soared. Good Shepherd, a great traditional song that Yorma sings, and it's a great kind of folk traditional piece of music. And it reverts back to their folk years. So there's some folk rock on this record as well as these soaring anthems, perfect for 1969, anti-war, civil rights, everything. The Farm and Hey Frederick is kind of out there, but really a great song. Of course, side 2, Turning My Life Down. And then you got Wooden Ships, put out the same year as Crosby, Stills, Nash version of it. And it's a song written by Steve Stills, David Crosby, and Paul Kantner. So they had just as much rights to do it. Now, the Crosby, Stills, Nash version is wonderful, but this version with Paul Kantner, Marty Balin, and Grace Slick's, changing out every stanza, every verse. It's just beautiful. And when they go into that wonderful chorus, wooden ships on the water, very free and easy, it just soars. I give this the edge over the Crosby, Stills, Nash version, which might be technically more beautiful, maybe. But this, man, I mean, they're both great. I mean, I shouldn't even compete. They're not part of this competition. And then you go into a couple more songs, ending up with Volunteers, this great, One Generation Got Old, One Generation Got Soul. We're Volunteers of America, Volunteers of America. And the Grateful Dead never gave you peanut butter and jelly. So, this one might be a little close, but 1969, I'm giving it to the Jefferson Airplane. By an edge, maybe. I think, no, I think they win. It's like a nose. It's a little more than a nose. It's a length. Jefferson Airplane wins 1969. 1970. The Jefferson Airplane didn't put out an album in 1970. They were, Grunt Records was starting up, their custom label for RCA Records. Hot Tuna, Paul Kantner with his spaceship crap, and Grace Slick, and, she would do some solo things over the next few years. And it was really splintered. Yorma and Jacko often do Hot Tuna, and that's great. And I saw them live, and they were friggin' great. But it started kind of like splintering off, and Marty pulling back and out, but the Grateful Dead finally write amazing songs, make two masterpieces that a lot of people didn't quite get at the time. In 1 year, they put out American Beauty and Working Man's Dead, these two amazing, ultimate country rock albums. Great songwriting on both. You got, it's Upside Down the Way It Was Printed. That's the original. You got them doing Uncle John's Band, which is a classic forever. High Time, Dire Wolf, what a Jerry Garcia masterpiece song. I mean, obviously the collaborations at Bob Weir. You got New Speedway Boogie, Cumberland Blues, Black Peter, Easy Wind, and Casey Jones, another masterpiece. American Beauty with this, what a great cover this is. And on here, you open up with a great Phil Lesh Hunter collaboration, Box of Rain. His bass playing is beautiful on that too, and just the arrangement. Friend of the Devil, again, a great song. that Hunter and Garcia wrote with Dawson from the New Riders. So it's got that country thing. The New Riders finally are coming on, and they're going to put their album out soon with Jerry Garcia. Sugar Magnolia, I mean, finally a great, great Bob Weir song. And his vocal works on that song. I like him in that song. You know, as long as he doesn't stretch it. You always thought, you know, one more Saturday night. That was the thing that really bothered me when Weir was doing that. But in this song, Sugar Magnolia, he nails it. He knows his range, and I think it's really great. Of course, Operator, the Pigpen song, and Candyman, just a beautiful vocal. This is where the Grateful Dead got their act together in terms of their harmony, vocals. They don't try to do what Jefferson Airplane does. They don't go high, but they stay in a certain range, and they do it beautifully. I mean, obviously, the Grateful Dead in 1970 win by default since the Airplane didn't put anything out. But I don't think the Airplane, probably in that time where they were, based on my experience and knowledge of that band and what I saw them, they wouldn't have done anything like as good as these two records. Addicts of My Life is the great, great, you know, three-part harmony. Of course, Truckin', which everyone knows, you know, really based on the Art Crumb, Keep on Truckin' comics, and 1970, Grateful Dead. You can't do better in 1970 probably than these two albums. They're masterpieces. I mean, can you imagine if this was a double album? We don't need a double album. We got two records. That's what we need. 1971, the Grateful Dead know what they do really well, and they do the Skull and Roses album. It's just called Grateful Dead. Double album, another double live album from 1971. Originally came with a sticker. I had a lot of these stickers on my car back in the day. This is my original Maslov signed copy. I don't know, I did that around 71. I guess I was bringing it over. And this was a turning point for me too, because this record and seeing them live and hearing them live turned me on to a lot more country music, a lot more. They were listening to the whole, you know, Merle Haggard and Buck Owens and the Bakersfield sound. And of course on here, you know, they do the John Phillips song, Me and My Uncle. They do Me and Bobby McGee, the Chris Christopherson song that Janis Joplin would eventually do. But of course they do Mama Tried on here. Mama Tried from Merle Haggard. They would go on to do a couple of great songs that I got turned on to Marty Robbins with Big Iron and El Paso. And this is a wonderful record. Of course, you have Bertha. You have the other one, which takes on 18 minutes on side 2, Not Fade Away, and Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. This is a perfect live album. And then you got the Jefferson Airplane, fresh off of Grunt Records, their own custom label. And RCA lets them do a lot of freaky-ass design stuff. This is bark with the bag still intact. Of course, you got Paul Kantner with Marijuana Hairstylings. This is my original copy. The Bag and Bark, the Fish. Now, this is an album, people, when this came out, it was like, what the fuck is this? This album has gotten better with time, but it wasn't a well-received record. But I will say, another Maslov edition. Why would I? Thank God I didn't write on a bag, right? Not my bag, babe. But you got here, okay, When the Earth Moves Again, Paul Kantner song in that sci-fi realm, which is a wonderful song. Feels So Good, Kakkonen, Crazy Miranda, Slick, Pretty As You Feel. The two songs, ironically, I liked was the new guy in the band, Joey Covington. You got Pretty As You Feel, and you got Thunk, which is kind of this weird harmony. They're kind of almost novelty songs, both those. Pretty As You Feel has this great kind of jazzy, like lo-fi guitar thing going on. Grace Slick, of course, with the humor, and what a whack job in a beautiful way. Never argue with a German if you're tired, or a European song. I know from experience about that. War Movie, again, another Kantner song. Rock and Roll Island, Kantner song. Again, not a perfect record. So in 1971, the Grateful Dead wins by far over the Jefferson Airplane. Woof. 1972, Long John Silver, arguably the worst Jefferson Airplane album, even worse than the album they called the worst Jefferson Airplane album, the worst of the Airplane, which was their best of that RCA put out. This is the last album they did in the original as a group. Not everyone is on here. Papa John Creech is on here, or the playing violin adds to it, which I don't think was a great addition, a great sound for them, for my opinion. There's a couple of good tracks. Again, this is where their art direction was way beyond the music. It opens up, and mine never folded mine out, but this is basically a cigar box. Basically, it's for your stash, right? You open it up, and of course, RCA, man, they were really great. Then it has your stash in the middle. Long John Silver, not a great song. Airy, Milk Train, okay, Son of Jesus, Easter, Trial by Fire, Alexander the Medium, and Eat Starch Mom. I saw them around this time, and I saw the live at Winterland. I'm not even showing that. I think that they jumped the shark at that point. Even though I liked them live at Winterland around that time, the Flying Toasters album with Papa John. No Marty Ballin, right? This is a failure, an ultimate failure, 1972. And then in 1972, the Grateful Dead put out Europe 72. Warner Brothers puts out this 3-record set from that great summer European tour. This is the place, if you don't know any Grateful Dead, it's a great place to start. Now, granted, they did overdub some of the vocals. They did fix some of the music, overdub some instrumental passages, but it's a great sounding record. They're in harmony, they're in tune, which the Grateful Dead weren't always in either. But this is a good place to start if you have no Grateful Dead, because it has their great songwriting, has their great jams. Obviously, once you get into this, there's a lot of better and a lot of more interesting live things. But this is a good sampling of the best of the Grateful Dead live around this time. Donna Godchaux was on here, Keith Godchaux on piano. It is a different Dead. So, of course, 1972, by far, a million miles, the Grateful Dead kicks ass over the Jefferson Airplane. No contest in 1972. So that's it. The Jefferson Airplane versus the Grateful Dead. You decide. Thanks for watching. This is one man's opinion. Apparently, I have to say that because people don't know this is a subjective thing. This is for fun. It's for entertainment. I love both these bands. I grew up with both these bands. I saw them in their prime and in their decline in some cases, in both cases here and there. There's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert or a Jefferson Airplane concert if it's up to 1969. Mazzy loves you. Take care.